I am a female, and this is my story. I've never had a father, conceived by rape, statutory. I was born in darkness and ripped away from my mother as a child, both of us screaming and screaming while I was dragged by one leg, exiled. They squeezed from her breasts every drop of milk left for me and injected me instead with chemicals when I was hungry. But soon we were again reunited, mother and daughter, but under what circumstances? Manslaughter. She'd been deemed useless to growing old and weak, so her life was discarded like trash because with no milk left to offer, she had passed her peak. The first time I saw light was when the gates were opened and her naked body was murdered before my innocent eyes. As I looked down with eyes shut tight, I opened them to see my feet drenched in blood, along with my first and last sunrise. She was hung upside down with neck slit, still screaming in pain, mourning for me until her last breath. I never heard her voice again. I stood frozen, staring into her eyes until her blood was drained. Her head was chopped off first, rolling on the ground until it hit my feet. Finally, she was unchained. She was then diced into chunks with scraps of her skin mopped up off the floor, and then I watched as our meals were prepared and into our food she was poured. I didn't eat for weeks, so they sliced a hole in my gut where men in white lab coats would stuff me up and then close it shut. In that darkness, I was raised in a 2x2 wooden cage. Locked in these same chains, they kept me too drugged up to ever express any rage. Injected with 30+ unknown needles, causing me seizures with my limbs vibrating wildly astray. Causing me to eat so little but grow at an unbelievable rate. After a certain age, my legs were completely broken. I couldn't even support my own weight. By the age of 10, the time had come for me to follow my mother's fate. The same hands took my virginity there in that wooden crate. With a 3-inch wide metal bar, I was beaten and tortured and scarred and raped. And this is but a glimpse of the horror that I could never escape. I bore a child to that metal rod, and so began the next phase, or artificial insemination, as science says. 9 months went on in anticipation, feeling worried and lost, and then I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy that was soon to be tossed. You see, the men in white lab coats only cared for milk from mothers, so off to slaughterhouses went all the others. And so I witnessed the only other being I'd ever loved face the same painful demise as my mother up above. I mourned, and I still mourn to this day for my baby boy as I watched him squealing. I could do nothing but watch and lay. After a month of mourning, there was another encounter with the metal rod. If at all one exists, I truly began to question this so-called God. 9 months after, I gave birth again, this time to a sweet little girl, soon snatched away by the same devil's men. I watched as she was given her own 2x2 wooden crate, and I knew right then she was doomed for the same dark, dark fate. I felt hopeless and dead, just a body of pain with no reason to look ahead. These were just the first of their many brothers and sisters, my children. This pattern repeated itself again and again and again and again. After all, we're just machines to them. Inhumanity has stretched far beyond racism. Now I'm almost sucked dry with nothing left in my soul or my breasts. So I know my mother is calling. At last it is time for me to rest. Before I go, I share with you this reality. I am not alone. I am one of 9.8 billion facing this brutality. My story is 100% real and taking place on this very earth of ours. It's time we stop sitting back in our bubbles of convenience and acting like cowards. 94% of the dairy we consume is coming from factory farms where mother cows are facing this exact doom. So before you buy that cheese pizza or bite into that ice cream, I ask that you make a conscious alternative choice. Vegan food is not what's extreme. We've created hell on earth with no regard for life. We keep cool on the surface, but it's no wonder we're all facing internal strife. I think it's time we acknowledge this truth and start reevaluating what society deems uncouth. Where did we go wrong as humans to become this cruel? We've maximized efficiency, but we've become the biggest moral fools. In our world today, with everything available at our fingertips, we have no more excuses. Let's control what we eat and what we sip. Thank you.